Hello, KINES 55 students, and welcome to week 9. Last week we started talking about systems and strategies, and I enjoyed reading your assignments. And think you guys that have turned in the assignment have picked some great examples of systems and schemes that work for certain programs. And one thing that I would um, caution on, or words of advice in regards to system and strategies, is understanding that most of them work. They're when you look at systems that people use in sports and the strategies they use within those systems, just about all of them work. The common denominator for those working is that their players, number one, possess the skills to be able to execute those systems and strategies, um, and then their ability to be successful at them and be bought in. The buy-in to a system or a strategy is crucial. It doesn't matter who the coach is, or what the system is, or what the scheme is. If the players are not fully bought into it and believe in it, it's probably not going to be very good. Now, you always have the scenario where you just have better athletes than everybody else, and in that situation, system and strategies may not be as important. It doesn't really matter what system or strategy that you use if you just have dominant players, and you just allow them to play. You're probably going to have success. And so it's really important, though, that you identify your team. I think if you do not have the ability to recruit the exact athletes you need for a system or a strategy that you want to instill or install in your program, um, it's going to be really hard to do that. And so, as we kind of had a big picture idea of system and strategy for last week's assignment, this week we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of each of those. And so as you look at the system and the strategies that you want your team to utilize, and we've gone through the whole thing leading up to this, but now we need to really break it down. So we're going to assume that you have the players that can execute this system and the strategies that you have outlined. But now we have to go into, okay, how do we teach them? What are the skills that are needed for these types of systems? And that's where your homework assignment is going to be this week. So you have determined your scheme, and whatever you are going to do, we need to now look at each component of that and what skills are necessary to be able to do that successfully. And I'll give you an example. If you're going to be a pick and roll basketball team, players have to be able to understand and be able to execute a proper pick. They have to be able to make a pass. They have to receive the ball. They have to understand the mechanics for all of the skills, and all of those skills. Why you do this list is because you want to make sure that you're not leaving any stone unturned, and that you're not taking for granted any skills or techniques that your athletes need to execute effectively and be on the same page. And so by breaking down every single skill that's needed within a strategy, and then making sure you practice those skills, you're probably going to have a lot more success that way. Many times people practice strategies like, hey, we're going to do a pick and roll, but they spend very little time teaching the technique about getting your feet set, getting your body in the correct position, where your eyes should be looking, where your body placement should be, how you should respond to certain responses that you're going to probably get from your opponent. All those things you have to always even look one or two steps down the road, like, okay, we have this plan, but how is the defense or the offense going to react to this plan? Okay, and then how do we react to that plan? And having answers for your team and your players, and being able to break those skills down into little pieces, and maybe you do a drill. If you're trying to teach to, a pick and roll, you got to really teach how to set a pick and foot placement, body placement, where are your arms, where are your eyes, what's the anticipated response of your opponent, having all those things coached up, and then teaching coming off of a pick, and then teaching shooting off of a pick, or the person setting the pick is going to turn around and shoot. So there's all those skills that you have to go through. And so what I'm looking for this week is for you to pick at least 3 of the skills and techniques that you feel are essential to the system and strategy that you want to instill in your team. And then I'd like you to write up an outline with a laundry list of skills that are needed for that. And eventually what we're going to do is we're going to take now that laundry list of skills, and we're going to start working those into a practice plan. And the goal is that, we started with team culture and what kind of coach you are, and we're working our way to actually getting on the playing field and being able to have a team that functions in a successful way. So I want you to, this week, we're going to pick 3 skills or techniques that you listed that you feel are essential. We're going to write up a teaching outline for each skill. So if it's, I'm using the example again of setting a pick. If you're going to set a pick, you're going to teach all the little pieces of that. And one really effective way to teach any skill in sports, and probably any skill, but mainly in sports, because that's what we're talking about. You can either start at the head and work to the feet, or start at the feet and work to the head. And so, for example, if I was going to teach setting a pick, I would say, okay, we're going to start with the feet. Okay, first off, we need to have proper foot placement. We do this by doing this. And then work up to the body. We want to be in an athletic position. So if we don't want to get run over, so we have to have some leverage, and so we have to have a bend in our knees. We have to have a bend in our hips. We have to have our body in position. We have to be ready to roll off of that, and all the little things that go into that. And so I want you to outline those, okay, break them down, okay, and then within your outline, I would like to see different drills that you're going to do to teach those skills, and different ways. And there's lots of stuff online. There's lots of coaches clinics online. There's lots of teaching videos online. And so, whatever drills you would do to help teach those skills. And sometimes they may not even be a drill that's directly involved with it, but it might be indirectly involved. For example, the weight room is a great example. You're teaching exercises in the weight room so that your athletes can be bigger, stronger, faster, which will allow them to execute these techniques more successfully. So we're looking at a breakdown of not only the nuts and bolts of at least 3 of the skills you picked for your team, okay? But then we're looking for the breakdown of drills that are going to reinforce those things, okay? And the goal of a coach, one of them, is that when you play a game, that there is nothing that those athletes are going to be expected to do in that game that you haven't practiced. And that means you have to do a lot of homework as a coach, because you have to create those scenarios that are going to come up in each particular game that are unique to that game and unique to your opponent. Then you're going to have to say, okay, within our system or our scheme, we feel like these things will be the most successful. Now we got to break it down. What skills are needed? What drills are needed to do these things? And it just all feeds, it all has to be connected for you to have the most success. And again, I've mentioned that, many teams, many young coaches that I've observed, they like to scrimmage and they like to just play the game, the majority of the practice. And there is value to that. There's no doubt. Game experience and scrimmage experience and things like that. There's great value in that. But sometimes there's also the opportunity happens if you do too much of that, where you could develop bad habits and maybe lose sight of some of the fundamentals that are so essential to your success as a coach and your system and scheme. So that's why I feel like this is a really important lesson. This is something that we do even today with our football team. You know, I am the head coach, but I have a lot of assistant coaches, and when I see them doing a drill that I have a hard time correlating to an actual skill that's going to be needed on game day, I'll sometimes ask them, like, why are you doing this particular drill, and why are you doing it this way, and how does that correlate to what we're trying to teach in a bigger picture sense? And most of the time they have really good answers for why they're doing it. But once in a while, we'll find a drill and just say, you know, why are you doing this drill? Well, I really like this drill. They really, at the end of the day, they go, you know, maybe I need to change this drill. And so sometimes I'll make suggestions to my assistant coaches to modify a drill or maybe do more of another kind of drill, especially if I see us um, you know, lacking in an area. Like, for example, if we're struggling tackling on defense, you know, then that particular week or the rest of the season, I want to make sure that there's some emphasis on that, you know, and sometimes coaches just have a cookie cutter practice plan, and within that practice plan, it doesn't allow them to really, you know, they want to just kind of do everything. And sometimes, and many times in coaching, in athletics, and life, less is more. And there are a lot of coaches that you know, have these playbooks that are 400 or 500 pages long, and then there are some coaches that have a playbook that's 5 pages long, and you will see some that coaches from both those areas have similar success when they have certain components involved, and buy-in, practicing what you're expecting your players to do on game day, um, you know, having a plan, having the players that can execute that plan, all those things are key. And so many times, like I said, we have coaches that try to utilize systems without teaching all those nuts and bolts. And when you play good opponents, you're going to get exposed if you're not doing your homework and you're not putting the time in on the essential parts of that scheme. So really want you guys to put a lot of thought into um, all the techniques involved. But then I really want you to focus on the three or four most important. And again, I'm going to go back to a suggestion when you're teaching a skill. I think it's important to talk about every body part, because you're assuming nothing by doing that. Okay, all the way down to your eyes. And one of the biggest areas that I think people don't coach enough in sports is eyes. Where are your eyes supposed to be? And how can you better utilize your eyes to create better anticipation, maybe for a play, to see things a little sooner by keys that we can see that not all athletes see because they're not looking for them, but certain things might be tendencies from another team, you know, and your eyes, you know, for example, in a pick and roll, you might say, okay, the person setting the pick, his eyes need to be on this particular player, because if this particular player tries to cover or come over the top, then his eyes have to shift the other way and he has to roll. If it's a defensive back that maybe gets turned around, you know, we talk a lot about the eyes with our defensive backs and our defensive players, because your eyes don't lie, you know, and so we have to find the all the little things that you can see that can maybe give you that half a second faster reaction time, or being able to recognize a situation that's a tendency. Because when in sports, you know, in a lot of sports, let's say in baseball, the batter knows what pitch the pitcher is going to throw. In football, the defense knows exactly what play the offense is going to run, or the offense knows exactly what defense the defense is going to run, or recognizing those plays. That's such a huge part of coaching, and a lot of people don't talk about that. And so I want you to 100% in your techniques and in your description of them and the teaching of them, the eyes have to be in there. Where should their eyes be? What should they be anticipating? And how can they see that as soon as possible to create the fastest reaction time or the appropriate reaction time that's necessary to successfully complete your strategies? With strategies and techniques and all of these bullet points we're talking about, they all, I want to just touch one more time on buy-in. We've talked a little bit about buy-in, but you need to have your athletes bought in, and so we can always refer back to, how do we get that buy-in? Well, for a particular scheme or system, some of you have identified big time programs or professional teams that have a very distinct style of play. And if you are utilizing a version of that, then I think one way that you can help your buy-in is by showing other successful programs that maybe utilize some of those strategies, and say, one of the reasons why the Golden State Warriors are so successful in basketball is because they run this style of offense with this style of players. We have those type of players. We want to run this kind of offense, and we think we'll be successful at it. And so little things like that, finding other people that do it. Sometimes it's tougher to get buy-in if you're trying to do something that you feel is unique, because nobody's ever done it before. And sometimes that can be a little more challenging. But the reality is there's not much new in sports in regards to strategy or scheme or system. It seems to just kind of repeat itself in some version. And although there might be little tweaks with things, the basics are still the basics. If you want to be a good basketball player, you need to shoot 1,000,000 basketballs. You need to be dribbling all the time, both hands. You need to be working on passing. If you want to be good in football, it's the same skills. But it's the skills that we choose to emphasize that need to correlate with the system or the scheme that we're running. And so you could say work harder, but let's work smarter and harder. Let's have smart practices. Let's have smart drills that feed our system and feed our scheme. And let's be efficient with that. And that's really important. And so all this stuff that we're doing right now, this is gearing up to actually make a practice plan. And you say, okay, in the practice plan, we're going to have 10 minutes of this, 10 minutes of this, 10 minutes of this. For example, a football practice plan is broken down into 5-minute increments that we call periods. And we'll say, okay, we have 15 periods today or 20 periods today. And in this period, it's going to be tackling. In this period, it's going to be turnovers. In this period, it's going to be getting off blocks or blocking somebody. And it's all broken down in 5-minute increments. What we've found over the years, and what I think is common in coaching, is that many players have a short attention span, and keeping players totally engaged in practice and having great energy in practice, I think it's important to break things up into really short segments, and so that we can just keep a fast flow in practice, and a drill never becomes mundane or gets to the point where a lot of maybe people are standing around and things like that. We want everybody in motion. We want as many people participating as possible in drills. And so you as a coach, as you're teaching these skills, it's very, very important to create multiple opportunities when teaching that drill, rather than have a line of one person maybe doing a drill. Have a line with five lines of people doing the drill. And if it's a drill where you have to throw one of them a ball, maybe only one of them gets the ball, but everybody else does all the other stuff. And it's common for coaches also to not do that. And so what happens is you're not getting as many reps, you're not getting as many people through the drills, And when you're gonna, or maybe you're just getting your best players the reps, and you're gonna need all those players at some point, and it's a matter of time before that number one person gets hurt, and you need the number two person or the number three person. And so you're trying to, as a coach, make sure that every athlete gets as many reps as possible. And so be creative with the drills that you design to teach the skills that you're trying to teach. If you have a 5 minute period in a football practice and you have a line of 10 people and one person going at a time, they're probably going to get 2 or 3 reps at the most in that drill. Whereas if you put 5 lines of 2 and you do that for 5 minutes, you're going to increase the reps at that skill, probably tenfold by doing that. And so what I'm looking for from you guys is not only a breakdown of the skills and techniques, but then how you're going to teach them. I want even diagrams if you can. They can be hand-drawn diagrams. This is what this drill is going to look like. You can draw cones and this is where the athlete's going to be. But I really want you guys to get into this because this to me is where as they say, the rubber hits the road. This is where we're actually out there being teachers and salespeople, not in a negative way, in a good way. We're selling our system and our schemes to our athletes. And so we have to know them ourselves. We have to know all the nuts and bolts. Okay. And we need to be able to answer questions, and we need to be able to say why this is a good strategy and why this strategy is going to work against their strategy. And then sometimes even include examples of people that have used that strategy. And there's, like I said, there's so much on video now. You could show your team videos of multiple teams using similar strategies to what you want to do, which is great. Those are great. Most athletes and coaches are visual learners. And so if you have videos of the drills, over the years, I've been a speaker at many different coaching clinics, and I've filmed a lot of our drills to use at coaching clinics. And I think having film of your drills is really, really key. Not only to show great examples of what you're trying to teach. So let's say you have experienced players at the end of the year and you film them doing the drills that you like to do in practice. And then at the beginning of the year, being able to show new players, those veteran players executing those drills with success, and showing them exactly how it's supposed to look. That's really helpful. And then to follow that up, you then film those new players doing those same skills, and then you show them, and you allow them to see themselves doing the drills, and be able to compare and contrast with how it's exactly supposed to look. And then you do the same thing with the bigger picture. Now you say, here's our screen drill. Okay, here's how it's done perfectly. Here's how you did it yesterday in practice. Okay, you can see that your foot placement is off. Your eyes are in the wrong place. You're standing too tall with no leverage. You need to widen your base with your feet, and you go through all those coaching points, and then you show the whole thing. Here, boy, here's a team that runs the pick and roll just perfect. Now let's look at this guy. Look at where those feet are. Look at where his eyes are. Look at his reaction to the opponent. Those are huge. And so showing examples on film of successful coaches and programs utilizing those techniques, strategies, drills, and skills, and then you showing the athlete of video of them doing those drills and skills, and being able to point out and identify the coaching points and the teaching points that you need those athletes to understand. That's if you really, really, really want to get a skill taught. I think all those components are essential. Okay. It's like giving a speech. We're going to tell you what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about it. Then we're going to tell you what we talked about. Then we're going to show you what we talked about. Then we're going to show you yourself doing what we talked about. And then we're going to contrast and compare. And then we're going to do it again. And then we're going to repeat. And we're going to continue with that cycle. We film everything in practice at our football practices. Every drill is filmed, and we watch those films. And for players, it's a great teaching tool, because they can see, okay, hey Johnny, you've been missing a lot of tackles on Saturday. Well, I'm watching this tackling drill here, and you continually put your face on the wrong side of the ball carrier, which is making you have to try to rely on just your arms to bring down the ball carrier rather than getting your body in front and your head in front of the ball carrier. And now you have your whole body to help bring that runner down. And so you're not doing it in practice. That's why you're not able to do it in the games. We need to see you do this in practice. And you need to do this in practice so that you can have the confidence to go out there on Saturday and be successful doing it on Saturday. Now let's watch this film of a guy doing it perfect. Now let's watch your film and where you came up short. Now let's practice those things and then let's redo the cycle. To me, that is a very effective and common coaching technique, and it's used in, film nowadays is used at every sport. It used to be kind of the football coaches were the film junkies, but now um, you know, coaches of all sports are using film. And again, it's to give your players that educated confidence that they can be successful. And some of it is by seeing techniques done correctly. Some of it is by watching for tendencies from your opponents and their predicted responses to your strategies. Hey, here's the team we're playing this week, and this is a video of their game last week. Now watch when this other team tries to do this play that we're doing. Look what they do. And if you notice, they do this every single time this other team tries this particular play. So what we're going to do is we're going to show this and we're going to do something else. We're going to bait them into thinking we're going to do that. We get them in a position that is advantageous for us. And then we're going to execute this particular play. So video is huge in when you start talking about teaching these skills. And so I would strongly encourage you to use as much video as you can. And sometimes that's really hard to do because you may just only see the kids at practice if you're teaching or coaching youth sports. But I would strongly advise you to find a way to have film night at somebody's house with a team dinner. Even if it's to watch your game and go through that and then maybe watch some of your opponent and some of the things you're trying to do. That helps so much to set the table before you go out on the practice field and you try to explain the different strategies and the techniques. It's essential. And I can say it's a difference maker. Now with Zoom and things like that, if you're creative as a coach, you can have Zoom meetings and you can show film. You can have Zoom meetings and talk about your strategies and show examples. And so back in the old days, you needed all the media equipment, you needed a place and all that stuff, but it's a lot easier these days to get them together to watch film. And I think it's essential. And so this week's assignment, that can be part of how you're planning on teaching. And really, really examine what you are trying to do with your athletes. And again, put it all on paper so you can see it. Here's my drills, or here's my techniques along the top. Here's the skills within each one of those techniques, a laundry list under that. Then a laundry list or a sub version of that list where it would say, okay, we're going to teach a pick. Okay, here's the drills we're going to use to teach a pick. We're going to, after that, the pass. Here's the drills we're going to do for passing. And you come up with this grid of the overlying system, okay, or strategy or skill, all the skills, nuts and bolts that go to support that. Then all the drills, okay. And then the real challenge now is going to be able to take that whole laundry list and pack it into an hour and a half or 2 hour practice where you have to say, man, we can't teach all these skills in that hour and a half. How many can we teach effectively? What are the most important? And in football, there's so much to teach in a game week that you sometimes break it up each day, which is what we do. For example, on a Tuesday, our offense and defense is kind of still laboring through getting to know their opponent and how our plays are going to have to be altered to be successful against that opponent. And so we're a little rusty. It's a little rough around the edges on Tuesday. We're working on real basic stuff. We're working on like the strongest tendencies that we're going to see from our opponent. Okay. In football, we're looking at first down plays. Those are every drive starts with a first down. We're looking, and then from Tuesday on, or after Tuesday, I should say, then we're breaking down other scenarios. Like, for example, Wednesday might be a short yardage day and a third and long day. And then Thursday is, end of game scenarios and end of half scenarios and 2-minute drill and things like that. But you have to be selective because you're not going to be able to fit all of the techniques and all of the drills into a practice plan. And so it's your job as the coach to say, man, I get 3 practices this week before we play such and such. Here's the things they do the best. Here's the things we need to do to be our best. Here's the things we need to do to stop them from being their best. Now, again, you write the grid up and you say, okay, I have to prioritize some of these things. And the fact that you can never get through everything in one day means that your preseason before you start playing games is so huge. You have to, teach as many of the skills as you possibly can so that when a specific opponent comes up that's going to require a specific technique or a specific drill or strategy, that it's not the first time they've heard it. You want to try to get through everything you can in your preseason, or enough of that to where you can draw back on that and prioritize that for a specific week or a specific opponent. So having some preseason practices is huge, especially if you don't get to practice every day. And some sports you only get in 1 practice a week. And so, you're really kind of handcuffed in some ways in terms of the amount of things you can teach during a week. And so you have to be very, very selective and very wise in regards to, okay, we have to be realistic. Are we going to run the same offense as the San Francisco 49ers and we have 1 practice a week? Well, that'd be a ridiculous goal. Would be you're kind of setting yourself up for failure. If you have 1 practice a week, you're working on like the basic stuff and you're keeping it really simple. And you're saying, okay, we don't have enough time to be great at a bunch of things, but we have time to be good at a few things. And I think that's sometimes where coaches get in trouble. They try to do too much, and you can see based on our conversation today and the assignment last week and the assignment this week that the more things you add to that top level of system and scheme, the bigger that laundry list gets of skills necessary, practice time needed, drills needed. And so if you try to do too much, you end up being really average at a whole bunch of stuff and not really having a true identity as a team. So I think it's really important to identify the areas that are realistically achievable by you as a coach in practice, through your teaching, through your videos, whatever modalities that you're going to use. But you got to hang your hat on something at the end of the day. And your team, it's important to have a team identity. Like, this is what, some teams will say, we're going to be the best defensive team in the conference, and all of our practice plans are going to resemble that mindset. You'll see here that we have, a 2-hour practice, but an hour and a half of that practice are defensive skills and drills. And the other 1/2 hour is shooting, and passing. And so it's up to you to say, okay, what are those things? But strongly advise you, keep it simple. And I'm a big believer in master a couple of small things that will give you some success and then add to those, but don't move on until you gain a great understanding of those few things first, because that should be your foundation. It's like math. Okay. As a coach and a math teacher, you teach some basic fundamentals at the beginning of the semester. Okay. And then everything is related to that. And so week 1 is connected to week 2. And so understanding week 1 is going to allow you to understand week 2. And understanding week 2 is going to allow you to understand week 3. If we say, okay, you failed week 1, now we're expecting you to understand week 2, that's kind of impossible. Okay, because they lack the foundation or the skills to even learn that first one. So be cautious of trying to move too fast and teach too much. Okay, even at the college level for over 30 years, we teach basic stuff. And I'm always, kind of chuckle when I'll go to a youth football practice or a high school practice, and I watch coaches try to do 100 different things, and it's sometimes even frustrating to watch because you're not really giving those athletes a chance to be great at anything. You're just saying we're gonna just be all over the place, and maybe that is going to be our identity, that we're unpredictable and we're all over the place. And sometimes that works too, I'll be honest. But I'm a firm believer in, hang your hat on something, and whatever that is, that's at the top. Okay, along with your team goals and your program goals and all that stuff. And just like how every athlete's individual goals need to support group goals, like every defensive player's goals should support the success of the defense as a whole. Every defensive goal as a whole should support the team goals as a whole. Okay, that's how you gain strength and continuity with your goals with your team. Same thing on offense: individual goals, group goals, team goals. Okay, they all have to be funneled together and intertwined. And it's the same way with your techniques. Okay, as you teach one, and before you move on to the next, make sure they have a good enough understanding to know why that is important first step to be able to get to the second step. Crucial. And so again, one more caution: keep it simple. And no matter how great your scheme or your strategy is, or how well you know it, if your players don't know it, or they don't understand it, or it's too confusing to them, not going to be any good. And I can tell you, many coaches assume that their players have the same type of understanding for things, or should have the same type of understanding as they do as the coach. And that's kind of, I don't think that's the right attitude to have personally. The coach should know a lot more, but needs to understand that they know a lot more, and not try to give their athletes every single ounce of information they have, and every way of doing something they know of, because you're going to create indecision and you're going to confuse players. Um, and uh, so don't assume that, like, man, this is really easy. What's the matter with you guys? How come you can't get this? This is the fifth time in a row we've screwed this up. Where do we need to be looking? We need to maybe like pull out the mirror and say, okay, I'm not teaching this well enough. Maybe we don't have the personnel for this. Um, where am I missing the boat as the teacher? And that's where you need to look first. And you might find out, like, oh man, I'm getting all fired up about this thing. And when I look back at my practice plans, we only did that for 5 minutes. We did that one period on Tuesday, and it turned out to be like one of the most important parts of the game. And man, I wish I would have practiced that more. It's really important to reflect on your practice plan the week after as well. So you play the game, whether you won the game or lost the game, you're going to look at the areas where you think you could improve. And then you go back and you look at your preparation. You say, how well did I prepare my team for this? And what you might find out is that some of the things you thought were priorities may not be as big of priorities as maybe you first thought, and you need to switch those around a little bit and make sure you add some practice time for certain things. Our practice plans, even though we have a outline of like what a Tuesday practice looks like, what a Wednesday practice looks like, we're always having conversations amongst the coaching staff, like, hey, we really need some work on this situation. And if we could get the offense and defense together for 10 minutes each day to work on this one scenario, that'd be great. Or, hey, we need a little more time in this period, so let's change this period to a 10-minute period and make this next period a 5-minute period, or eliminate a period. And so reflection is huge on the techniques and strategies and the drills that you do, and don't just have the same thing every single day, unless you're achieving the exact results that you're hoping for. And then if you have that in and you have that dialed, then I think you have found a winning formula, and you can continue with that. Excuse me. but oftentimes things don't go our way, and we need work, and so you have to look at your preparation, and when your team doesn't play the way that you hoped it would, um, I think the right thing to do is to look at yourself first as the coach. And I think what you'll find is that sometimes when your team doesn't perform exactly the way you wanted them to, or in a certain situation, you can look back and you'll find that man, maybe you didn't practice it enough, or maybe you did practice it enough, and the players just dropped the ball. And sometimes that's the case too. But you have to look at both. We can't expect players to be really good at scenarios or techniques if we've never practiced it, and if we have only practiced it a little, or if we haven't shown success in that technique or something in practice. So as you set up your drills to teach these techniques, make sure that you're teaching them in a way where the athletes will, if they follow your instructions, they will eventually have success in practice. Okay. I think you want to try to avoid having drills that just continually defeat your players. And so I'll give you a quick example because we're getting close on time. But if I'm teaching an open field tackling drill, which is one of the hardest things to do in football, and if you just throw two people out there and you tell one guy to tackle the other guy, and you tell the other guy you can go anywhere you want to go, that's like the hardest scenario you're going to get in football, in my opinion. Okay. And whether it's trying to block somebody in the open field, or tackle somebody in the open field, or get away from somebody in the open field. And so what you might do is say, okay, here's a short little area where we're going to create that open field tackle. Okay. So to the ball carrier, you can only go in this little 2-yard box. To the tackler, where the ball is going. That's going to allow you to play with speed and play with confidence, and then ultimately have success in the drill. And then you take that little part and you make it bigger, and you make it bigger, and you make it bigger, and you add other people to the drill. And so you create ways for your athletes to have success executing the techniques in practice, so that they're going to buy into it and they're going to believe it, and you're going to rep it a whole bunch of times, so that when they get in the game and they're faced with that exact same scenario, they're going to respond appropriately, physically and mentally, and have the confidence that they're going to be able to succeed doing it. That's huge. Okay. And so if your players never do something right in practice, you're crazy to think they're going to do it right in the game. And so modifying the scenario into a way that your athletes can have success takes some creativity sometimes in the drill. It really takes you to say, okay, how can I do this another way where I can really show them? Because if you're doing an open field tackling drill and you give two people the whole field to work with, which is sometimes what happens, but not very often, the person with the ball could just run away from the guy and they would never, ever get to the tackle part. But by reducing the field, making it smaller for the drill, giving it a designated area where the ball carrier can run, with designated area where the tackler knows he has to be, now we can break the situation down and create a little part of it. And then as we gain success there, then we can broaden that drill. So hopefully those are some helpful hints as you guys get ready to embark on this challenge. It's a big one, man. Practice plans and planning practice, and your teaching schedule, your implementation schedule, huge, absolutely huge. And so just reminders on what the assignment is this week. It's to take that scheme, it's to take that system that you wrote about this last week, the scheme that the Patriots run or the scheme that the Warriors run, and then you're going to break down those skills, and then you're going to break down the drills that are going to support those skills. Okay. And really gain some perspective that way. And I think you guys hopefully will get into this assignment, because to me this is as we start to get in the nuts and bolts of it, to me it's more interesting than some of the other stuff. So if you have questions, always feel free to email me. and I'll get right back to you. If you have assignments that you still need to turn in, please get those to me. I'll accept them. And we only have a few weeks left of the semester. So let's finish strong. Like, you know, as we're all coaches in this class, right? Saturday, I'm so pumped. Last Saturday, we won our last football game, and we finished strong. Our players played their best game by far in the last game of the season, which is what any coach could ask in a last game of the season. And so I'm really proud of our players. If we treat this class like a game, we got to finish. Whether it's a boxing match and it's the championship rounds, whether it's the fourth quarter of a football game, whether it's the ninth inning of a baseball game or softball game, it's stoppage time in soccer, it's penalty kicks, you know. So we got to finish strong. And so you guys, we have few weeks left in the semester. Get your work in. Okay. There's no reason why any of you should have a bad grade in this class. And we'll help you through it. So I look forward to seeing you all next week. I hope you have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.